And joining us this morning is Kiko Aquino-Dee, co-convenor of Tindig Pilipinas. Good morning to you, Kiko.
Hi, Ms. Pawi. Good morning, and good morning to all of our viewers today.
Okay, so how are preparations so far? Is everything set for your third Trillion Peso March this Wednesday, February 25?
Yep, all systems go. We had our walkthrough last Friday. We're just having a bunch more meetings just to hammer out all of the sort of just crossing the T's, dotting the I's for the program, and we're looking forward to the events on Feb 25.
What would you say, Kiko, is what's different this time around compared to the first two protests?
Well, I think the very tangible difference is that this is the first one we're doing on a working day because, again, as a lot of us are aware, Feb 25 is a special working day, the only one of its kind in the calendar, and it is only the second time that this has happened since February 25 has been recognized as a holiday. So while we're hopeful for a crowd similar to November 30, which is 20 to 30,000, we're prepared for any kind of scenario. If this is smaller, if this is bigger, we're ready for that.
And will anything be different in terms of the program? And who are some of the personalities that the public can expect that will be attending this Trillion Peso March?
Yeah. So in terms of the program, we're adopting the formula we used in September 21, which is not to have any politicians on stage, just to really make sure that the focus of the event is on both the issues that we're dealing with, corruption, and pushing for the bills that we want, like the anti-political dynasty bill, the Independent People's Commission bill, rather. And also, in terms of personalities who will be there, in terms of the speeches that will be given, someone who hasn't spoken at the Trillion Peso March before, but we're excited to hear from her, is Professor Winnie Monsod. Will be talking about both her experience as an organizer during 86, as well as her current takes on the crises we're going through right now. And then for entertainment, I think, again, sort of new acts that we haven't heard from too often. Spit, the improv company, has agreed to do a segment for us to relating to both the issues that we're facing and the occasion of the 40th anniversary. So a bit of new stuff this time around. It's also a shorter program intentionally because we want this to be a bit tighter and not to impose too much time on the people who'll be coming, since we know it is a working day.
Well, I did see that clarification that you posted on Facebook, Kiko, laying out what the march stands for and what it doesn't. And you did list the key demands for this third Trillion Peso March. It's jailing corrupt officials, passing an anti-dynasty law, and creating those independent anti-corruption bodies. Why did you choose, or why did the conveners now choose to narrow it down to these three key demands?
Right. So I think the ikulong na yung mga kurakot has been what we've been chanting the whole time. No? So I don't think that'll ever go away as far as the Trillion Peso March is concerned, and as long as there are people who are evading accountability. Political dynasties has also always been part of the agenda since the first Trillion Peso March. In the second, for the second one, we made it front and center. It's the Trillion Peso March against corruption in political dynasties. So I think those are a natural sort of escalation to continue to have that bill on the table. And then the third demand, the Independent People's Commission bill, I think that's a response to what we're seeing right now, where there is some progress as far as the anti-corruption issue is concerned, but as far as holding people who are closely related to Malacanang, or even investigating the role of the president himself, all of our other institutions haven't been able to do that. Now, we've had an impeachment recently, which was ended prematurely. So I think the venue to ask these questions is now that Independent People's Commission.
And you were also very clear about rejecting calls for violence, the involvement of the military, and even installing a non-elected group in power. Why was it so important to draw that line this time around?
Well, I think it's always been important, no? So those discussions of the ideas of revolutionary government and whatnot, those have circulated, I think, in the news around all of the previous Trillion Peso Marches, and we've been at great pains to say that we are loyal to the framework that is laid out in our Constitution. And I think especially now at the 40th anniversary of People Power, which is also the spirit that animated the 1987 Constitution, we want to be clear that we're not straying from the path that is laid out in that document.
So how do we do that, Kiko, right? You did acknowledge that, yes, things are moving along in terms of the flood control investigations, but the so-called big fish are absent from those important discussions. How do you think the public should push for accountability when it comes to the so-called big fish?
Right. So, just to be clear, no, I do want to be a little fair in that. I do think, since it looks very likely that cases will be filed against some incumbent senators, we already saw former Senator Bong Revilla arrested in relation to his involvement here. There are some big fish being arrested, no? So that's progress. But again, we say it's not enough because certain big fish that are close to the president are evading accountability. So how do we push that? Again, the Trillion Peso March is a protest movement, no? And so a lot of our particular way of advocating these causes is to go out on the streets and call for these things, no? So I think we've seen that the arrests that have happened now would not have happened if it weren't for the previous marches. And so I think it's important for people to go out on the streets and continue to be firm about this demand. Na dapat ikulong ang lahat ng mga kurakot, not just certain people. But beyond that, I think small things like organizing smaller protests, I think is always helpful to just keep the habit going. And I think other things like to help the case along, like I think a lot of the exposés on people involved in the flood control scam are the result of tips that common citizens have given to media outlets. So I think that's something that hopefully should continue, recognizing that that's a thing that requires quite a bit of courage, but hopefully that's something that people continue to do to shed light on these issues.
Well, February 25 marks 40 years since the EDSA People Power Revolution in 1986. And you've said, Kiko, that this is not just a commemoration, but also a time for self-reflection. When you look at the country today, would you say that we're in a better place than we were 4 decades ago, or are we still facing the same problems?
So I would say we're in a better place than we were 40 years ago, simply because we were able to restore our democratic rights in this country. But if you look at the issue of corruption, which was one of the reasons why that led to the downfall of the Marcos dictatorship, the corruption is worse now. If we look at the issue of human rights abuses, we've seen, while I think the truth about it is still emerging, it's very likely that the human rights abuses under the previous Duterte administration may have equaled or surpassed the abuses during the Marcos dictatorship. So I think, again, I feel that self-reflection is an important theme for this 40th anniversary, because we need to ask ourselves how we let things get back to this level. Definitely, we aren't the most guilty. Those are the ones, again, that those are the ones now facing accountability in the ICC. Those are the ones we're chanting at to be jailed during the Trillion Peso Marches. But because it's a democracy, it's impossible that things came to be this way without us letting it happen in one way or another. And I don't have specific answers as to how that happened. That's something that's a burden and a question that I think requires a lot of self-reflection, which is why I think that's something also I think we need to invite ourselves to do. Or we're inviting each other to this February 25.
Okay, but for those young Filipinos who did experience the 1986 revolution firsthand, how do you make the spirit of the People Power Revolution still relevant to them today? Because as we've seen in your previous marches, a lot of the youth actually attended, but this time it also coincides with the 40th anniversary of the People Power Revolution. So how do we make that spirit relevant to them?
Well, for me, so there's a distinction, I think, between the spirit and the concept. Now, if you ask younger people, do they resonate with EDSA or People Power? Maybe not as many people would say yes. But if you talk about the spirit, which is the idea of taking responsibility for what happens in this country, standing up for things that we think are important, and using collective action in a peaceful way to bring about change, I think that's something that young people figured out on their own. Because even before I was involved in this protest, a lot of college students, Gen Z people were already taking the lead on this anti-corruption movement. So I think that spirit is very much alive, whether they connect it to People Power or not. It would be nice if they did, right? And that's something I'm trying to do. But even if they don't, I think that as long as that spirit of collective action is there, then the spirit of people power doesn't really go away, even if another name is used.
All right. Now, on a different note, Kiko, I wanted to ask you about Sara Duterte's recent announcement that she is indeed going to run for the presidency in 2028. And some analysts say that she is strong, but she's not unbeatable. But yet, we still don't really have an idea on who would be the strongest contender for Sara Duterte. And you've been firm in opposing any alliance between the opposition and the Marcos administration. Walk us through that sentiment, Kiko.
So I think the first point I want to give is that the Trillion Peso March movement is not really directly discussing 2028, especially at this time where it's quite early and we want to focus on the anti-corruption issue. So the statements I'll be giving are, as you mentioned, sort of just my own personal sentiments, as opposed to, I don't want to give the impression that I'm talking for the whole movement. And I don't want to I don't want to divert attention away too much from the current issues towards 2028. That being said, I do think that what people are looking for is a clear alternative to the corruption that we're seeing right now. And while I believe that VP Sara Duterte is burdened with a lot of legitimate questions about her own integrity, about corruption in the offices she was in charge of, and on top of that, she also, I think, the same way that President Marcos has never apologized for the abuses that were done by his father. I've never heard VP Sara Duterte recognize or apologize for the very significant harms done by the war on drugs in this country. So I think it's important to oppose her, but at the same time, it's important to be clear about what we're opposing, right? An alliance with President Marcos, first, I think, muddles that clarity, precisely because, again, he's never apologized for what his father did. So what ground do we have to say that we're against the war on drugs if we're willing to tolerate that kind of lack of accountability for the abuses of the martial law administration? And how serious can we say that we're anti-corruption if we're going to ignore the unanswered questions in VP Sara's different offices? So I think the very clear path forward, if we feel, and we do feel, that people care about corruption, people care about these issues, is to paint a clear alternative. So I think that the way forward is to be that alternative and not to compromise with one or the other side.
All right, well, we're going to leave that conversation there for now. I know you're still very busy with all your preparations. So thank you very much for sharing your time with us. That was Tindig Pilipinas co-convenor Kiko Aquino-Dee.
Thank you very much, Ms. Pawi. Thank you to everyone listening and viewing today.